Okay, cool. We're ready for our next talk. Our next speaker is Chris Hunt. He's a developer at GitHub. He lives in Portland, where he fled to when he got tired of San Francisco, I guess. He has the unique distinction of being the first person ever to recognize me in a bar by my voice. He's like, where do I know your voice? I'm like, do you listen to podcasts? He's like, Ruby Rogues, you're David Brady. So that's Chris. So this year, GoGaRuCo comes with a toy surprise inside. So if you got a swag bag, look inside. You should have a Rubik's Cube around. Now Chris, or is this a Ruby's Cube? I'm not sure. So anyway, Chris has been doing Ruby for 5 years, but he's been solving the Rubik's Cube for way longer than that, like 7 years. And he's like one of the best in the world at solving the cube, sixth in the world solving the cube blindfolded. So that's pretty, it's like I can't even solve it at all anymore. Okay, so big hand for Chris, and get your cubes ready.
Sorry about resetting the timer. Got really excited. So I'm Chris. I'm from GitHub, and I'm going to teach everybody how to solve the Rubik's Cube in less than 20 seconds. We're going to do this in 5 steps. Follow along if you can, but we're going to go a little fast. This is going to be more like reflect on this later. Okay, so 5 steps. So step number 1 is buy a cube. So I already did this for you. So we're already on to step number 2, which is turn the cube. And notice this isn't solve the cube. This is just turning of the cube. Because right now, most of you probably have no idea how to actually solve the cube. So what you want to do is just turn it, mess with it, and you're going to notice a few things. The first is that the centers, they don't move. They're your reference point. So look at the center, and that's going to tell you what color that side is supposed to be when solved. If the center is green, then that side's going to be green. If the center is red, then that side's going to be red. That's kind of a core concept, so get familiar with that. The second thing you're going to notice is there's 2 types of pieces. The first is an edge piece, which has 2 colors. There's 12 of them. There's 4 on the top, 4 in the middle layer, and 4 on the bottom layer. Notice I'm referring to them as layers and not sides. The second type of piece you're going to notice is a corner piece. Those have 3 colors. And there's 8 of those because it's a cube, right? There's 8 corners. Makes sense. There's 4 in the top layer and 4 in the bottom layer. That's it for step number 2. So learn that. Try to do some basic stuff like move a piece from the top layer to the bottom layer just by doing 1 turn. Just get familiar with moving a few pieces around. Don't even worry about solving it, though. That doesn't matter. But it does on this step. So step number 3 is learn some algs. And algs, I mean algorithms. And so believe it or not, there are a ton of people already in the world that can solve the cube in less than 20 seconds. There are a ton of people who can solve the cube in less than 10 seconds. There are people that can solve the cube in less than 5 seconds. And they don't just make up stuff. They teach each other how to do this by sharing their move sequences that do very specific things. And it's called an algorithm. Each letter in there represents a move, and it's easy to learn. So looking at the cube, each side is going to have a letter associated with it. The front is going to be F. The back is going to be B. The left side is going to be L. The right side is going to be R. The upside's U. The downside is D. So if you see an R, that just means turn the right face 1 turn in the clockwise direction. If you see a U, that means turn the U face 1 turn in a clockwise direction. And if you're confused about which direction is clockwise, just look at the face. So this is the right-hand side. If I see an R, I just look at R, and then I turn it clockwise. Same with the U. If I want to know which direction is clockwise, I look at U, I go, OK, here's a clock, and then I turn it 1 turn clockwise. So that's a U. You're also going to see a couple different modifiers. So here we see a prime. If you see R prime, it means do 1 turn in the opposite direction, or counterclockwise. And then the only other modifier you're going to see is a 2. And that means turn that face 2 times. Okay? Direction doesn't matter when you see a 2, because 2 turns clockwise is the same as 2 turns counterclockwise. You're just turning that face over. Now there is one special move that you need to be aware of, and that is the M move. This stands for middle, and it's referring to the middle slice. This is not a side. So if you see M, that means you're turning that middle slice one turn clockwise. And similarly with M prime, you're turning it one turn counterclockwise. And I'm going to show this one too because it's a little complicated. So here's this M slice. Always use the right side as your reference point for M because you can't just look at M and know which side is clockwise, right? So looking at this face, I can see this is the clockwise direction. So if I want to do an M, I'm doing this. M prime is going the opposite direction. So M prime, M. Cool. That's like a pro move right there. It really is. OK, so that's all you're going to see. In almost every algorithm you look, every Rubik's Cube solution in the entire world, everywhere, whatever. You can now solve, you can learn any algorithm you want. So we're going to apply that now and learn a 2-cycle solution. And this is going to get you going. You're actually going to be able to solve the cube in less than 2 minutes with this. So some of you are just going to stop here. You're not even going to go any further because 2 minutes is enough. Friends and family are impressed. You're good to go. So this is called a 2-cycle solution because it only deals with 2 pieces at any given time. And then you completely ignore the rest of the cube. So you don't need to pay attention to all the crap that's happening. You're just focusing on 2 pieces and doing something very specific with those 2 pieces and then moving on. I like to call this the bicycle solution or the bicycle solution. Ta-da. And you're not going to be able to Google this because I made it up. OK, so we have 4 steps to the bicycle solution, each dealing with only 2 pieces at a time. And we're going to look a little deeper at those 4 steps. But first, we have some trivia. So how many positions are on the Rubik's Cube? 7. Incorrect. We have 43 quintillion positions on the Rubik's Cube. So a lot of you had no idea how big this is, so I have an analogy, and that is if I had 43 quintillion of the little like hot cocoa marshmallows, and I started stacking them, I would make a stack 4 miles high that would cover the entire surface of Earth, including the water. So that's a lot of positions. OK, that's amazing. Moving on. We're going to continue with the bicycle solution. If you want to follow along on your phone, because we're going to be going through the slides kind of fast, you can do that. Or if you want to follow along on your iPad in a cafe, you could do that as well. Here's the URL, chrishunt.co/bicycle. And these slides will be available later. So if you're not a quick typer, I will put it up in a second. So step number 1 of the bicycle solution, swapping of the edges. And remember, we're only focusing on 2 pieces at a time. So here is the algorithm that we're going to learn to do this. This picture shows exactly what it does. It's only going to swap the edge in the upper left with the edge in the upper right. That's it. Totally ignore what else is happening on the cube because it doesn't matter. You're going to use this single algorithm to move every single edge piece. Remember, there's 12. You're going to move every single edge piece to the correct location using just this algorithm. You might be asking, how am I going to use an algorithm that only swaps 2 edges in the top layer to position every edge? It doesn't even make sense. Well, that's right, it does not make sense. However, if you use a process that I call setup, fix, undo, then you can do it. So you set up the cube in a way so that this algorithm swaps the pieces you want it to swap, and then you undo those setup moves in the reverse order to get back where you started. So let me show you what I mean by that. Now totally ignore what I'm doing because I'm just doing some setup so I can show this example. So here we have our cube. What we want to do, yes, excuse me, humble brag. So we're on the first step. So our goal here is to position every edge piece. Notice here I have an edge piece that's out of place. I know that my algorithm is going to swap these 2, and that's all it does. That's the only thing it does. So I need to look at this piece. Let me say that when I use this, I always do it the same way. I always hold the cube like this, and I always look at the upper right-hand spot. Because I know my algorithm is going to do a swap there. So I'll just look here, and I'll ask myself, where does this piece need to go? So this piece is blue and red. So remember, our centers don't move, right? So I just look for the blue center, and I look for the red center, and I know that the edge piece has to live between those 2 centers. So I'm going to keep my finger on that spot and return the cube back to the home position here, and then ask myself, what setup move do I need to do to get this piece up into this spot so that I can do my swap and move it in the correct location? Okay? So I'm going to show you, this is going to blow your mind, but it will become very obvious later. We're going to do an L prime, and now the piece is here, and an L prime, and now it's up top. So now I'm going to do that one algorithm that's going to move the piece to the correct location that I've memorized. And then we're going to undo those setup moves, so move them in the exact opposite order. So L, L. And now if we look down here, you'll see we solved that piece. Awesome. So now we do the same thing. We look at this exact same spot, because we just moved the piece out of there, so there's bound to be something new here. We look at this spot and we say, now where does this piece need to go? Well, it's green and it's red, so I look for the green center, the red center, and I look between them, and boom, it must have to go right here. So now I think, what setup move do I need to do to get this piece here? Well, I don't need to do anything, so I'm just going to do my fixing algorithm. Cube is solved. Cool. Step number 1. OK, so now we're on to step number 2. This is exactly the same as the last step, except now we're doing it with the corners. Same exact concepts apply. So notice this algorithm. It's longer than the first one, but it feels really nice on the fingers. You're going to swap the algorithm. You're going to swap the corner piece in the front left with the corner piece in the back right. That's all it does. So let me do some setup for this one as well. OK, so we're on step number 2. Our edges are looking amazing. But notice our corners are not placed correctly, right? So we know an algorithm that just swaps these 2 corners. That's all it does. So I'm going to do the same thing I did with the edges and look at this spot and ask myself, where does this corner need to go? Well, it's blue, red, and yellow. So I look for the blue. There's the blue. I look for the red. There's the red. I look for the yellow. There's the yellow. So here we go. This is the only piece that's between blue, red, and yellow. So I know it must belong here. So I'm going to keep my finger on that spot, return the cube back to this home position, and ask myself, what setup move do I need to do to get this corner to this spot so that I can swap these corners? So I'm going to do a B prime. That moves it here. And then another B prime, and that moves it up to the top layer. So now it's right where it needs to be. I'm going to do my fixing algorithm. This is the same one that was just on the screen. And then undo those setup moves. So move them in the reverse order. So B, B. And if we look down at that corner now, you'll see it's solved. So then we just do it just like we did in the edges. We go to the next corner. We just look right here and we say, OK, great. Where does this corner need to go? It's green, orange, yellow. So I look for the green, the orange, and the yellow centers. Here, this must be where it needs to go. So I'll leave my finger on there. And we have no setup moves we need to do this time, right? So I'm just going to do that fixing algorithm with no setup. And now the cube is solved. So now we've correctly placed all the edges and all the corners, and there's a good chance your cube is totally solved. However, sometimes it's not solved. So we have 2 more steps that account for this. Because even though you've moved the pieces to the correct position, they could be facing the wrong direction. Like an edge could be between the right centers, but it's like, the up color's facing out, the out color's facing up, like it's totally the wrong way. So we have an algorithm here that's going to flip 2 edges. In this step, we're going to go through and just flip edges 2 at a time until they're all oriented the correct direction. This algorithm is going to flip the edge in the front, and it's going to flip the edge in the back. So I'm going to do some setup one more time here. So here we have an edge piece that's totally in the right location, green and white, and it's between the green and the white centers. However, it's flipped, not facing the right direction. On the back side, we have the exact same thing, green and yellow between the right centers, but it's flipped. So luckily, we know an algorithm that flips just these 2 edges. So we can do that now. Cool. So here's another case. Notice this edge piece here. It's flipped incorrectly. We have another edge that's flipped incorrectly over here. But our algorithm only flips these 2. It does not flip this edge piece. So in order to fix both of these at the same time, we need to do the setup, the fix, and the undo. We need to move this piece over here so that our fix is going to flip them both. So I'm going to do my setup. I'm going to do an L prime. That's going to move it here. And then a B prime, and that moves it up top. So now they're across from each other. So I'll do the fixing algorithm and then undo those 2 moves. So B, L. Cube is solved. All right. Last but not least, the final step of the bicycle solution, rotating of the corners. And this is done exactly the same way as the previous step. All our corners are already in the correct location because we did that in step 2, but they might be facing the wrong direction. So this is an algorithm that rotates the corner in the front left and rotates the corner in the front right. So we're going to look at an example for this one. So here we have 2 corners that are in the correct location, green, white, red. Here's my green center, my white center, my red center. So it doesn't need to be moved anywhere. However, it's rotated incorrectly. Over here, the exact same thing. So I know an algorithm that's going to rotate both of these corners. So I'll just do that algorithm. And it's solved. Cool. That's it. That's the bicycle solution. So you really only need to memorize 4 things. That's it. And then you can solve the cube in under 2 minutes. Now, the hardest part about this, and I know everybody was thinking this, is that the setup and the undo moves are impossible. Like, I have no idea how to do that. Like, I showed really basic cases, right? You can imagine maybe there's a cube over here that you need to move top layer. How am I going to do that? It seems very confusing. That is definitely the hardest part. But there's a gem that's going to help you learn. So if you go to GitHub/ChrisHunt/Rubik's Cube, you're going to see a Ruby implementation of the bicycle solution exactly as you've learned it today. So you're going to create a new Rubik's Cube, and it always starts in the solved position. You can then apply any algorithm you want to that cube using the same syntax we learned today, or you can call methods that do the same thing. You can also, let's say you totally messed up your octacube today, and you have no idea how to solve it. You could set the state of the cube in your Ruby land here to the same state as the cube in your hand. Read the read. I didn't put it on here because it's kind of bad, but you can do it. And then create a new 2-cycle solution known as the bicycle solution that we learned today. Pass in your cube, and it's going to print out every single step to get your cube solved. It's going to show you the setup move, the fix move, and the undo move. Okay? You're only going to need to use this maybe 10 times, and then I promise you it's going to click, and you're going to be like, oh, I got this. Set up, undo, this is great. I totally got this. All right, cool. There's a good chance, though, because everybody here is a programmer, that you're going to get addicted to my amazing gem and want to write your own solution. So we're going to go on a quick tangent and talk about how computers solve the Rubik's Cube, because it's actually very different. So when I first decided to write a cube solver, I wrote the bicycle solution, but I was trying to think, like, what would be a good way for a computer to solve it? Because that's very different than how we would solve it with our fingers. We probably want lower move count or something. I don't know. I don't really know. I didn't think about it that much. But the first thing that popped into my head was, why don't we just create a giant table of all the states and then put the solutions next to them? So I just take a picture of my cube, it just looks it up in the table, and then spits out the solution, right? That totally makes sense. However, even if you were able to magically somehow compress the entire state of the cube and the solution into a single byte of storage, which you can't do, but let's say you could, you'd still need over 39 million terabytes to store that table. So that's not going to work. However, you can do it in a very similar way, and that is to break the solution up into 2 steps instead of just doing it in 1 step. The most popular way of doing this is Koisyenba's 2-phase algorithm. And I'm not even remotely sure if I pronounced that correctly, so let me know afterwards if you know how to say that. But this algorithm works in 2 phases instead of 1, and it uses 2 lookup tables instead of 1 lookup table, but it works very much the same way. So in the first step of Koisyenba, we have 1 table whose whole goal is to get the cube from a scrambled position to an oriented position. And by oriented, I mean all the pieces are facing the correct direction, but they're not necessarily in the correct location. So this is a much smaller table because we're not even trying to solve the cube. We're just trying to flip the pieces so that when we do move them to the correct location, they're facing the correct location. Does that make sense? So how this works is we just walk through the algorithms one at a time, trying them on the cube until one actually works. And then when it works, we're like, oh, cool, that worked. And then we go to the next step. And the next step is the same thing, except now we're moving from an oriented state to a solved state, which is, again, a much smaller table than having to hold on to everything at once. We can evaluate how good our solution is by adding up the number of moves in the first step with the number of moves in the second step. And then we get the total number of moves. Now, usually when people use this solution, they'll run it multiple times, because you could pick a different solution in phase 1 and still orient the cube. There are a ton of ways to orient a cube using different moves. And that's going to give you a different sequence in phase 2, which could lower your total number of moves. So this is so fast that people usually just run it 20, 30, 100, whatever, however long you're willing to wait, set a threshold on how low you want your move count to be, and then you're done, and it comes back. So it's a really cool algorithm, and it's actually not that complicated. Go to koisyenba.org, check out all the cool math behind it. There's a Java implementation on there. There's a program called Cube Explorer that you can try on your cube, take pictures. It'll tell you like a 19-turn sequence to solve it. It's amazing. OK, so here we are. We're almost done. We have learned the bicycle solution. Let's get back to Fingerland. And we want to solve the Rubik's Cube in less than 20 seconds. However, the bicycle solution is only going to get you at about 2 minutes, because you're turning the cube a lot. So it's time to get serious. You need to learn a real speed cubing method. And these are the 4 most popular. Everyone you've seen that blows your mind at the Rubik's Cube is using one of these 4, or they're a genius. So the one I would recommend that you learn is Friedrich. And the reason I recommend this is not only because it's the one I use and I'm biased, but also it's the most popular. So there you go. It's also a great natural progression from your bicycle solution. All 4 of the algorithms that you already memorized, you can continue to use in Friedrich. And the stuff that you tried, the setup and undo moves that you had a really hard time learning, that applies really, really, really well to Friedrich as well. So it's like, it's just a natural progression. It works out really well. Friedrich is also known as CFOP, which just describes the 4 steps of solving the cube. The first step is cross, which is just building something that looks like a cross on one of the faces. It's solving 4 edge pieces. After that, you're going to do F2L, which stands for first 2 layers. This is where you build up from that cross and solve the bottom 2 layers of the cube. So the only thing unsolved at this point is just that top layer. Now, both of these steps are done using intuition, raw brain power. There's nothing you need to learn for this. This sounds really hard. However, like I said, the setup and the undo moves that you learned already are going to be plenty for you to complete these first 2 steps of Friedrich. So I'm going to show you what this looks like. So I need to scramble the cube first and hide my taskbar. And I'm using a professional scrambling technique. So, oh, I don't need that on. So what we want to do is hold the cube the same way every time. And the reason I do this is so that when I solve the cross, I'm always looking for the exact same colors. It makes you a little bit faster. If you're looking for different colors every time or solving a different face every time, you're always looking for different colors, and it's not nearly as obvious. So I start with the blue side. So here's the blue center. My goal in the cross is to solve all 4 edge pieces on the bottom. So I'm going to look for all 4 edge pieces and position them. And I'm going to do this quickly, so you probably won't have any idea what I'm doing, but I just want to show you what it looks like. So here's the cross, totally solved. Okay? The next step is solving the bottom 2 layers together. That's these 2 layers down here. So I look for every piece that's supposed to belong in the bottom 2 layers and move them down there. And again, there's no algorithms you need to memorize for this step. It's just going to be using the setup, the fix, and the undo moves that you already learned. Cool. So now, notice the only thing messed up is this top layer. The bottom 2 layers are done. So that's why we move on to the third step, OLL, or orient last layer. Here we take all the pieces in the top layer and flip them so that the up color is facing up. For this step, you're going to need to memorize 57 algorithms. However, you already know 2 from the bicycle solution. So you're on your way. And actually, you can complete this step using just those 2 algorithms. Each additional algorithm you learn up to the 57 is going to make you a little bit faster, but you really only need the 2 that you use to flip edges or rotate corners. That's going to be plenty for this step. So looking at this now, I'm going to use one of the 57 algorithms that I've memorized to orient the top layer. Boom. So the only thing left here is positioning the pieces into the correct location now, right? So here we go. Last step, PLL, or permute last layer. And this is the final step of Friedrich, where we take all the pieces that are now facing the correct direction in the last layer and just move them around so they're in the right spot. There are only 21 algorithms you'll need to memorize for this. However, like the last step, you already know 2 from the bicycle solution. You learned one that that swaps 2 edge pieces and swaps 2 corners. That's going to be all you need for this step. But each additional algorithm you learn up to the 21 is going to make you a little bit faster. So I will use one of the 21 algorithms that I have learned to permute the pieces in the top layer, and now our cube is solved with Friedrich. Thank you very much. Okay. If you want more information on Friedrich, you can check out this really short URL that I made, bit.ly CFOP-Friedrich. Some of you are going to be like really excited about this, and you just want to go straight to this and totally skip bicycle. That's totally fine. But for those of you that want quicker results and want to be under 2 minutes before trying to learn all these crazy algorithms, I recommend starting with bicycle solution first. And we apparently have our trivia. Here we go. Trivia. What is the current world record for the Rubik's Cube? Incorrect. The current world record is 5.55 seconds, and it was set March of this year. It is constantly going lower. This guy is nuts. Okay, perfect. We are almost done. We're on step 5 of solving the Rubik's Cube in under 20 seconds. So by now, remember, you have learned Friedrich. You have memorized all 57 orientation algorithms. You have memorized all 21 permutation algorithms. Your local news station has probably put you on the news. You've been printed in the newspaper a couple of times. However, you want to start getting competitive. So these are the final steps you can take to kind of refine your solution a little bit more and go to competitions and do all this good thing. So the first thing you're going to do is take that octacube that you have and put it on a shelf and get a real speed cube. Real speed cube. So go to lubicscube.com, spend about 25 bucks. Same cube I have here if you want to see what it feels like. It's amazing. Basically what they do is they just break the cube down, they sand all the pieces down so there's no imperfections, they put it back together again, they adjust the tension, spray a little lube in there, and they stick what are called torpedoes in. And these are little locking mechanisms that help prevent your pieces from popping out. Because once you start getting about 30 seconds or so, you're going to have pieces pop out of your puzzle and your whole Rubik's Cube falls apart. The whole thing falls apart. So this is actually very important. After you've done that, you're going to want to get some new stickers. So you probably didn't notice it. However, I have fluorescent stickers on my cube. I have a very bright yellow, a very bright orange, because they're more visible to me. They also last longer. If you're colorblind, you can get colors that you're more sensitive to as well and stick those on the cube. Or if you're blind or know somebody that's blind, you can get Braille. You can also get tiles to stick on the cube if you're tired of your stickers wearing out. CubeSmith.com is a good place for that. That's a great URL for silicone lubricant. Silicone lubricant is also something that you might try using on the cube that you have now. It's a cube that works well on plastics. You spray a little bit inside the cube and then work it in. And for about 6 months, your cube's going to feel amazing. And then you're going to have to put a little bit more in. But it's very clean. It doesn't drip out of the cube or anything like that. Finally, now, when you're under 20 seconds and you're probably thinking about going to a competition or meeting some other people that are into speed cubing, you're going to want to get a real competition timer. And that's what this guy is up here. Speedstacks.com, originally made for cup stacking, now also used at real professional Rubik's Cube competitions. It's a flat mat. It has a timer. I could probably just go over to the camera for this too. Yeah, it's got a timer here. You put your hands on. When you release it, the timer starts. The display here is totally optional. I got it just for your benefit. Excuse me. So that would probably be the last thing you're going to need to do. If you have any questions on your road to becoming a speedcuber, go to speedsolving.com. There's a very active community there. They'd love to answer your questions. They're into both solving with your hands and solving with a computer. They know way more about this than I do. If you have any questions for me specifically, you can also hit me on Twitter at Chris Hunt. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, wow. So we have a couple minutes left. How many times do you want to solve the cube for us? What was that?
6.
One more? Can you just one more time?
Oh my God. Okay, somebody's got to scramble it though. Okay.
Wow, this feels great.
It's amazing. Rubik's Cube, lubicscube.com, professional speed Rubik's Cube. Okay, so I'm starting with the blue. I took off my mic, that's why I'm yelling.
Where's the timer control?
Oh, okay, here. Let me put my mic back on. We still have a minute, so I'm not going to kill anybody here.
Do you want me to time you in and out, or
no? I got it.
Hit it yourself. Okay.
I got it. I think. Can everybody hear me? Yeah. Okay, so in a competition, you have 15 seconds to examine the cube before you solve it. So that's what I'm doing now. I'm looking for the edge pieces that belong in that cross. And I found them. So now, usually what you do in a competition is you'll put the cube back down. They'll put a cover over it. The cover looks exactly like a Rubik's Cube. It's a little bit bigger. It's just a plastic tin. Put it on top, and then you take it off to start solving. So I put my hands down, and it's usually not so awkward. And I forgot where my pieces were, okay? So then you put your hands down. The little light turns green, and then you start solving. Notice, I did not actually solve the Rubik's Cube. So not only
Okay, Chris,
was
I'm sorry. I really want to apologize for this.
Okay, we're good. Totally done. Okay, sorry.